The Galactic High Council was the most powerful force in the known universe. It was made up of species that had ruled for thousands of years, each one older and more advanced than humanity. Their chamber was built on a world of crystal towers, floating bridges, and skies filled with great silver rings. When the council called, every younger race was expected to obey without question. On this day, the chamber was full. Delegates from many worlds had gathered. Some came in shining armor, some in robes woven with glowing threads, and others in strange suits that hid their bodies. They were all there for the same reason. It was the season of tribute, when the High Council demanded gifts and resources from the younger races in exchange for protection. To refuse was unthinkable, for the Council's fleets could crush any who defied them. One by one, the races had stepped forward. A species from a desert world offered ships of rare crystal. Another from a jungle world gave up their forests, cut down and stacked in piles. Others surrendered minerals, technology, and even groups of their own people, sent to serve the Council's needs. Every time, the High Council accepted the gifts with cold approval. Every time, the younger race left the chamber smaller and weaker, yet too afraid to resist. At last, the humans were called. The chamber grew quiet when the name was spoken. Humanity was new to the stars. They had only joined the interstellar community a few decades ago, and many species still saw them as reckless and untested. Whispers passed through the chamber as the human envoy walked forward. Some aliens leaned closer to their neighbors, their voices carrying doubt and amusement. "Too young to know fear," one alien hissed. "Too weak to refuse," another replied. The human envoy was a man named Ryan. He was dressed in a simple dark uniform with no ornaments, unlike the others who wore bright colors and heavy symbols of wealth. His steps were steady as he crossed the floor toward the raised platform where the council sat. He did not bow, but he did not show rudeness either. His face was calm, his hands at his sides. Above him, the council's speaker shifted in his jeweled armor. The speaker belonged to one of the oldest races, tall and broad with a crown of horns that gleamed under the chamber's lights. His eyes glowed faintly, and his voice carried like thunder when he addressed Ryan. "Humanity," the speaker declared. "The time has come for you to prove your loyalty to the Council. You stand among the stars because we allow it. You travel the lanes of the void because we protect them. Now you will pay tribute as all others have paid." The words echoed across the vast chamber. The other delegates turned their eyes to the human envoy. Some expected him to fall to his knees. Others expected him to try bargaining, to beg for mercy as weaker races often did. None expected defiance. The speaker raised his hand, pointing one clawed finger down at Ryan. "The Council demands half of the resources of your world. We demand your industries, your harvests, and your fleets. You will provide what we ask, or you will face the judgment of the Council." Gasps rippled through the chamber. It was a harsh demand, harsher than what had been asked of most others that day. But the Council had always seen humanity as a bold, troublesome people. Now they wished to break them early, before they could grow too strong. Rian stood in silence for a moment. His eyes moved across the chamber, taking in the faces of the delegates. Some watched with pity, others with cruel amusement. He saw no friend among them, but he did not falter. The speaker leaned forward. "Do you understand the demand, human?" Ryan raised his head slightly. His voice, when he answered, was steady and clear. "I understand." The chamber grew even quieter, for it was the pause before the choice. All waited to hear what tribute the humans would give. All waited to see them bend, but Rian did not speak again right away. He let the silence stretch, and in that silence, unease began to stir. The council was powerful, yes, but there was something unsettling about the way the human envoy stood. He was not trembling. He was not bargaining. He looked as if he carried a different answer altogether. The council speaker narrowed his glowing eyes. "Then speak, human. What will you offer to the council?" Every delegate leaned forward. Every whisper died. The air itself felt heavy, as though the stars outside were holding their breath. Ryan took one step closer to the platform. His boot struck the crystal floor with a sharp sound. His face remained calm, but there was a spark in his eyes that no one could mistake. It was not fear. It was not surrender. The council had demanded tribute. They expected riches, resources, or obedience. But the humans had come prepared with something else entirely. And when Rian finally opened his mouth to speak, the chamber would hear an answer unlike any they had ever received before. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the council's speaker rose higher on the platform. His jeweled armor shone with sharp reflections, and his glowing eyes searched every corner of the hall, before fixing again on the human envoy. He wanted all species present to remember this moment, to see how the humans would be broken. "Humanity is small," the speaker began, his voice rolling like distant thunder. "You are new to the stars. You hold no seat in this council, and you have no fleets worthy of respect. You owe everything you have to the stability we keep. It is time for you to pay your debt." The words were heavy. They were meant not just for Rian, but for every listening delegate. The council always used these moments to remind the younger races of their place. Around the hall, other species shifted, their eyes gleaming with unease or quiet relief that the demand was not aimed at them this time. The speaker spread his arms wide. "The tribute of humanity will be this. You will surrender half of your world's resources, half of your industry, half of your strength. Your fleets will serve under our command. Your people will labor where we send them. This is the price of survival." Murmurs broke out among the delegates. It was a crushing demand. Some leaned toward one another, whispering doubts. Others sneered, certain that the humans would fold like all the rest. On the floor, Rian did not move. His hands were steady, his face unreadable. Only his eyes seemed alive with a quiet fire as he studied the council above him. The speaker leaned closer, his horns glinting under the chamber's glow. "Do you understand what is required of you?" "I understand," Rian said again, calm and clear. The speaker's lips curled in something between a smile and a threat. He believed the human stillness was the stillness of fear. He believed the pause was surrender waiting to be spoken. The chamber shared this belief. It had always been so. The younger races always gave in. From the upper tiers of the chamber, another delegate rose. She belonged to a slender, long-lived species with silvery skin. Her voice was soft but carried across the room. "Council Speaker, the demand is large.
Humanity is young.
They may not survive such a weight." The speaker turned, his jeweled armor ringing with the motion. "Then they will die under the weight, as all who fail do. The council does not lower its hand for the weak." The silvery delegate sat down again, her head bowed. None dared challenge further. The rule of the council was iron. Now the attention returned to Rian. The speaker raised his voice once more. "Human, give your pledge. Speak your obedience and bring your tribute when called." The hall waited. Every species leaned forward, eager to hear what the humans would say. Some pitied them, some mocked them in silence, but all expected submission. Rian's boot struck the crystal floor as he stepped forward again. The sound echoed sharp and strong, and it cut through the whispers like a blade. He lifted his head, and for the first time a trace of expression touched his face. It was not fear. It was not weakness. It was resolve, his voice carried, firm and steady. "We have heard the demand." The chamber hushed. The tone was strange. It did not sound like surrender. It did not sound like fear. The delegates shifted uneasily, as if the air itself had grown heavy. The speaker's eyes narrowed. "Then give your answer." Rian looked around the chamber once more. He saw the towers of the council rising above him, the banners of the elder species draped in triumph, the glowing eyes of rulers who had demanded and taken for thousands of years. He saw the younger races watching with dread, already certain the humans would bow. But Rian was not there to bow. He took a breath, his words ringing across the grand chamber. "We will not kneel. We will not surrender half of what we are. Humanity was not born to be a servant." Gasps broke out at once. Some delegates recoiled in shock. Others shouted in disbelief, their voices filling the chamber with chaos. Never in living memory had a young race spoken with such defiance. Never had one refused the council so openly. The speaker's armor gleamed as he rose to his full height, his horns cutting the air above him like dark crowns. His voice boomed with sudden fury. "You dare refuse the High Council? You dare bring defiance into this chamber?" But Rian did not waver. His stance was steady, his eyes unshaken. He had spoken, and the words were carried now by every echo in the vast hall. The council had demanded tribute. The humans had given them something else. One word would follow next, a word that would not only shake the chamber but ripple through the stars themselves. The chamber was alive with noise. Gasps, murmurs, and sharp whispers rippled across the tiers like waves. Delegates leaned over railings, their eyes wide, their voices filled with disbelief. No one had ever heard such bold words from a young race. Some of the elder delegates were amused. They thought it was the pride of a child soon to be crushed. Others were unsettled, for there had been no hesitation in the human envoy's voice. His refusal had not sounded reckless. It had sounded certain. The council speaker raised one clawed hand, and the noise faded. His glowing eyes locked on Ryan, the human envoy who now stood at the center of the hall. His jeweled armor caught the light of the chamber's crystals, making him appear as if he were carved of steel and fire. "You speak as if you have a choice," the speaker said, his tone sharp. "Do you not understand what stands before you? The fleets of the council can burn your skies. Our weapons can shatter your worlds. One command from this chamber, and your species would vanish like dust in the wind." Ryan lifted his head. His voice was calm, steady, and clear. "We understand." The words carried across the chamber without effort. They were simple, but there was no weakness in them. He spoke as one who had measured the threat and accepted its weight. The silence that followed was heavy. Every delegate watched, caught between fear and curiosity. The council speaker narrowed his eyes. "Then why defy us?" he demanded. "Why place your people in danger? Your ships are few. Your colonies are young. You cannot stand against us." Ryan's gaze did not shift. "Because humanity is not afraid of the price of freedom." More whispers broke out. Some delegates laughed nervously as if the human had told a joke. Others shook their heads in disbelief. But there were a few, very few, who leaned forward with interest. For in the envoy's words they heard not foolishness but conviction. The council speaker's voice grew louder, rolling through the chamber like a storm. "Pride will destroy you. Defiance will bring ruin not only to your world but to every colony you have touched. No one will come to your aid. No one will stand with you." Ryan's reply was quiet, yet it carried to every ear. "Perhaps. But no one will ever say that we knelt." The hall erupted again. Some shouted in anger, others in shock. And still others remained silent, struck by the strange courage of this small species. The council had crushed dozens of young races before, and all of them had bent or broken. Yet here stood a human refusing without fear. On the upper tiers, a delegate of a bird-like race turned to her companion. "Do you hear him? He does not tremble." Her companion, a reptilian figure, hissed low. "It will not matter. The council will crush them as it always does." But even as they spoke, unease spread. The chamber had grown unstable. The rhythm of tribute, submission, and rule had been broken. The council had demanded obedience. The humans had given resistance. The speaker's armored hand clenched into a fist. "Enough of this. You will give the council your answer now. Speak the word of obedience or face judgment." Every eye in the chamber turned to Ryan. The silence stretched long. The moment felt heavy, as if the air itself was pressing down on every soul present. Ryan stepped forward again. His boots rang against the crystal floor, sharp and deliberate. His figure, though plain compared to the jeweled armor of the speaker, carried a presence no one could ignore. He lifted his head, and his voice came steady as iron. "Our answer is one word." The chamber froze. Whispers died. Even the council speaker, who had known only power for countless years, leaned forward to hear. "One word," Ryan repeated, his eyes sweeping across the hall. "One word that carries the will of all humanity." The delegates leaned closer. The silence was so deep that the faint hum of the chamber's energy field seemed to echo like thunder. The council speaker growled. "Then speak it." Ryan's gaze locked on him, unflinching. His lips parted, and though he did not shout, the word rang clear across the vast chamber. The humans had spoken their answer. The chamber would never be the same again. The chamber was silent. Every delegate leaned forward. Every voice was hushed. The council's demand hung in the air like a great shadow, and the human envoy's promise of a one-word reply had turned that silence into a storm waiting to break. Ryan stood tall at the center of the hall. His uniform was plain, without jewels or shining colors, yet in that moment he commanded more attention than the jeweled council speaker above him. His eyes were calm, his stance firm, and when he finally spoke, the word he gave was as sharp as a blade. "No." The sound of it struck the hall harder than any weapon. It was only 2 letters, a single breath, yet it carried like thunder. It echoed against the crystal walls. It filled the air between the towering platforms, and it seemed to linger in the ears of all who heard it. The delegates froze. Some blinked in disbelief as if they could not trust their hearing. Others gasped openly, their mouths wide, their bodies tense. Never before had such a word been spoken in that chamber. For thousands of years, the answer had always been yes, always submission. Always obedience. The Speaker of the Council rose to his full height, his armor gleaming like fire, his horns curved high, his glowing eyes blazing with fury. "What did you say?" His voice shook the chamber, but it could not bury the human's word. Ryan repeated it, calm and steady. "No." The sound cut through the noise like a spear. No excuses, no fear, just defiance, simple and complete. The hall erupted. Delegates shouted to one another. Some cried out that the humans were mad. Others whispered that this was bravery unlike any they had seen. Some feared the council's wrath, while a few dared to feel a spark of hope at the thought that the council might not be unchallenged forever. The council speaker slammed a clawed hand against the railing of the platform, and the crash silenced the noise for a moment. His voice was full of fury. "You dare refuse tribute? You dare refuse the will of the council? Do you not know what we can do?" Ryan lifted his chin, his eyes fixed on the speaker. "We know, and still our answer is no." There was no shaking in his voice, no tremor in his stance. He spoke as if the threat of destruction meant nothing compared to the weight of surrender. The elder races shifted uncomfortably. For ages they had watched the council demand and take until no young race ever questioned them. But here, in this moment, a human had shattered that pattern with a single word. The speaker's voice roared. "You think you can stand against us? You think your small fleets and fragile worlds will protect you from the storm we will bring?" Rian's reply came without hesitation. "We will stand as long as we must. Better to stand and fall than kneel and survive." The words carried across the chamber, and though they were not shouted, they struck deep. Many delegates bowed their heads, shaken. A few could not hide the flicker of admiration in their eyes. Others whispered in low voices, wondering if this one word might be the start of something larger. The council speaker drew himself back, his fury barely contained. His voice lowered, but the threat in it was clear. "Then you have chosen destruction. Your people will be made an example. No other race will dare to follow your madness." Ryan remained calm. His hands rested at his sides. His eyes never wavered. Perhaps they will see that there is another way. The chamber grew uneasy again. The delegates exchanged glances, uncertain. For in their hearts, many had once wished to say the same word to the council. Many had dreamed of refusing, but none had dared. Now humanity had spoken it aloud, and that sound could not be unheard. The speaker gestured sharply to the guards at the edges of the chamber. "Remove him. Let him carry our warning back to his people. Their defiance will be answered with fire." Armored figures stepped forward, their weapons gleaming. Yet Ryan did not flinch. He turned, walking with steady steps across the crystal floor. His back was straight, his head high. The words still echoed behind him. And the silence that followed was not the silence of fear, but of something new, something dangerous for the council. As he reached the great doors of the chamber, Ryan paused. He turned his head slightly, his voice carrying one last time before he left. "Our answer does not change. Humanity will not kneel." The doors closed behind him, and the chamber was left in turmoil. Delegates argued, shouted, and whispered. Some called for war. Some feared rebellion. And some, though they did not admit it aloud, felt the first stirrings of courage in their own hearts. For the first time in many centuries, the council's demand had not been met. For the first time, one word had broken the order of the galaxy. That word was no. The word echoed long after the human envoy had left the chamber. No. It hung in the air of the council hall like smoke that refused to fade. The delegates argued in loud voices. Some shouted that the humans were fools who would soon be crushed. Others whispered in quiet tones, wondering if such courage could really exist. The chamber had been the place of submission for centuries, yet a single word had shattered the old pattern. The council speaker remained still upon the high platform. His jeweled armor no longer looked bright and powerful. To many watching, it seemed heavy, as if it could not hide the truth. The truth was simple. For the first time in living memory, a demand had been refused. Outside the council chamber, the news spread quickly. Couriers rushed to their ships. Messages ran through the channels of trade. By the time the human envoy returned to his vessel, half the galaxy already knew. Humanity had said no. On distant worlds, the reactions were divided. On a cold desert planet ruled by a smaller race, the people gathered in secret halls. They spoke in whispers, afraid that council ears were near, but the words filled them with a dangerous warmth. The humans said no. They stood and they were not struck down at once. Perhaps we too could stand one day. On a jungle world far away, the elders of a subdued race shook their heads. The humans are reckless. The council will destroy them, as it destroyed others who dared less. Nothing will change. Yet even as they said this, their youngest children listened with wide eyes. They were not thinking of destruction. They were thinking of courage. In the great cities of the elder races, the story spread too. Some of the powerful mocked it. "They are children," said one noble, his voice thick with scorn. "The council will teach them a lesson, and the galaxy will forget them." Yet even among the elders there were quiet voices that did not mock. A few, very few, felt a crack in the wall of fear they had built long ago. Back on Earth, the human colonies listened with pride. When the envoy's message reached them, people cheered in the streets. Factories roared louder, building ships and machines. Farmers worked harder, their harvests sent not to tribute but to supply their own. For the first time since they had joined the stars, they felt united not by fear but by choice. Rian, the envoy, returned home to a hero's welcome. He did not wear armor or crown, but when he stepped onto Earth's soil, crowds gathered. They did not celebrate him alone. They celebrated the word he had carried, a word that belonged to all of them. Yet even as hope spread, the threat grew. The council was furious. In secret halls of power, the elder races gathered. Their voices were sharp, their faces dark. "We cannot allow this," one said. "If one race defies us, others will follow. If others follow, the order of the galaxy will fall apart." Another slammed his hand upon the table. "Then we will make an example. Humanity will burn, and every other young species will see what happens when you dare to say no." But not all agreed. A quiet voice rose among them. "If we destroy them, we may create martyrs. If we crush them, their courage may spread farther than their words ever could." The council chamber was filled with division, but one truth remained. The humans had struck a blow not with weapons, but with a single word, and that word now traveled faster than any fleet, faster than any beam of light. It reached every corner of the galaxy, every ear that longed for freedom. In the shadows of the stars, small rebellions stirred. A worker on a mining moon paused in his labor and whispered, "No." A mother in a conquered city held her child close and thought, "No." A soldier serving under the council's flag tightened his grip on his weapon and wondered what it would mean if one day he too said, "No." The shockwave could not be contained. Back in the human colonies, leaders gathered in council of their own. They spoke of the danger. They knew fleets would come. They knew war might follow. But none suggested surrender. They were no longer thinking of survival alone. They were thinking of dignity. Ryan stood before them, his voice as steady as it had been in the council chamber. "We have given our answer. Whatever comes, we will face it as free people." The room was silent for a moment, then every leader nodded. The choice had been made, and there was no turning back. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, anger burned like fire. In the hearts of the younger races, hope flickered like a new flame. Across the stars, one word moved like a storm. That word was no longer only humanity's. It belonged to all who heard it and believed. No. The galaxy had never seen a defiance like this. The word no traveled faster than fleets, faster than messages carried through light channels. Every corner of human space pulsed with energy. Citizens who had once worried about the council now worked with determination. Factories built new ships, farms produced more food, and young pilots trained without rest. Humanity had chosen its path, and they would follow it with strength. The council, meanwhile, could not ignore such a challenge. In their towering crystal chamber, the elder races gathered in anger. The speaker's horns glimmered like fire as he addressed his peers. "Humanity dares to say no. They defy us openly. This cannot stand. They must be punished." A golden-winged delegate raised a hand. "We cannot underestimate them. Their fleets are small, but they are bold. If we strike too hard, their courage may spread." The speaker's glowing eyes narrowed. "We will strike hard. They will see the power of the council. Other races will learn to obey. This is necessary to maintain order." Meanwhile, in human space, the reaction was different. The humans were not naive. They knew the council's fleets were enormous, capable of destruction on a scale that few worlds could survive. But fear did not rule them. Determination did. Leaders held emergency meetings across the colonies discussing defenses, fleet mobilization, and evacuation plans for vulnerable planets. They studied the patterns of the Council's fleets, using every strategy they could find to protect their worlds. Ryan walked among the leaders, calm and purposeful. "They will come," he said, "but we are ready, not just to survive, but to show that humanity cannot be broken by fear." On distant planets, young species watched the humans closely. Many whispered among themselves. "If humanity can stand, maybe we can too," one said. "The Council cannot rule forever without question," another replied. In secret, small rebellions began to form. Workers refused to obey orders that sent them into dangerous labor. Scientists slowed projects meant only for the Council's benefit. Farmers kept supplies for their own people instead of sending them as tribute. The word no had become a spark in the hearts of others. Back on the front lines of human space, fleets prepared for defense. Starships large and small lined the orbital platforms. Engineers repaired weapons and engines, and soldiers trained in zero-gravity simulations. Despite the Council's power, morale was high. Humanity had never been stronger in spirit because for the first time they were not asking permission to exist. They were claiming it. The Council, frustrated by this unexpected defiance, sent envoys to the human worlds. They came with threats and ultimatums, warning of destruction if tribute was not sent. But the humans refused to negotiate. Each envoy returned empty-handed, carrying reports that shook the Council more than they expected. Humanity did not waver, and the message spread. The humans would never kneel. In the colonies, ordinary citizens became part of the resistance. Children watched soldiers train with fascination, inspired by the courage of their elders. Farmers sent messages of support to the fleets, and engineers volunteered for long shifts. Every act, large or small, strengthened the human effort. The Council began to understand that defiance was more than a word. It was a movement, a force that could not be stopped by fear alone. And across the galaxy, whispers grew louder. Other young races wondered if they too could rise. Humanity had lit a flame that could not be contained. Rian looked out over a launch platform as new ships prepared to depart. The engines glowed like fireflies in the night, reflecting off the water below. He smiled slightly, not in triumph, but in certainty. Humanity had made a choice, and they would follow it together. The first Council fleet had already started its journey. The humans knew the battle would be difficult. They knew some worlds might fall, some ships might be destroyed, yet their courage was unbroken. They had faced the greatest power in the galaxy with a single word, and that word had carried them farther than any weapon ever could. In the Council's chamber, the speaker slammed his fist against the crystal platform. "They are too bold, too reckless. They must be shown the consequence of defiance." But even as he spoke, he knew something had changed. Humanity had not only refused tribute, they had awakened something in the galaxy. The Council could punish, threaten, and conquer, but the spark of courage could not be destroyed, and somewhere in the shadows other young species watched, learning that defiance was possible, and that fear was not the only path. The galaxy was on the edge of a new era. One word had started it all. The stars had changed since the Council demanded tribute. Humanity had answered with one word, and the ripple of that word had spread across the galaxy. The word no was no longer just a refusal. It had become a symbol, a spark that could not be contained. On Earth and the human colonies, life had changed. The fleets had grown larger, more disciplined, and more united. Factories worked tirelessly, producing new ships and equipment. Training centers buzzed with activity, where pilots and soldiers learned to navigate the void. But it was not only preparation for war that filled human hearts. It was pride, courage, and a shared belief that they had the right to choose their path. Ryan walked among the people, observing their efforts. Children ran alongside robots carrying supplies. Engineers discussed new designs, and soldiers practiced formations in zero-gravity chambers. Everywhere he looked, humans worked together with energy and purpose. It was not fear that drove them. It was the belief that they had taken their place in the galaxy by their own will. Beyond human space, the Council's fleets were still a threat. Massive warships moved through star lanes, their weapons ready to enforce obedience. Yet when the humans saw them approaching, there was no panic. Instead, there was resolve. Humanity had faced the most powerful force in the galaxy and spoken their truth without hesitation. Other young species began to take notice. On distant mining moons, workers paused and whispered the word they had heard through secret channels. No. On jungle worlds, leaders gathered quietly, considering whether they too could stand against the council. On desert planets, people began to protect their homes in new ways, inspired by the humans' courage. In secret, the council observed. Their anger had not faded, but their confidence wavered. They realized that this small young species had done something unprecedented. One word had disrupted the centuries-long pattern of fear and submission, and the thought troubled them. On a human flagship orbiting a distant colony, Ryan met with leaders from several worlds. Maps of star systems glowed on the walls, and holograms showed the movements of council fleets. Yet their discussion was calm. They were planning not only defense but the future. "We may face battles," Ryan said. "We may lose ships and worlds. But the galaxy will remember why we stand. We do not fight for fear. We fight for choice," the leaders nodded. Every plan, every order, carried the belief that they were no longer slaves to expectation. Humanity's courage had become more than a word. It had become a movement. Soon the first clashes occurred. Small skirmishes in distant star systems tested human fleets. The Council sent elite ships to destroy them, but humans fought with skill, coordination, and determination. Even when losses occurred, humanity adapted. Each victory, however small, strengthened the belief that they could survive without kneeling. News of these skirmishes traveled quickly. Other young races watched with fascination and growing hope. If humans could stand, maybe they could too. The spark of rebellion began to spread. The galaxy's order, once unchallenged, now faced questions it had never known. Back on Earth, children listened to stories of the Council and humanity's refusal. They were told how a single word had changed the course of history. They practiced courage in their games, imagining themselves standing in the Council chamber. Teachers reminded them that bravery was not born in fear but in choice. Rian looked at these children, at the workers, at the pilots preparing for the unknown. He understood that humanity's true strength was not in weapons or fleets. It was in their spirit. The refusal to bow, the refusal to surrender, had awakened something that no fleet could destroy. The Council's fleets continued to move, but their threat had lessened. Other young races began small acts of resistance. Supplies were withheld, colonies fortified, messages of defiance sent in secret. The galaxy was beginning to change. One word had set a new tone. In the council chamber, the speaker could only watch as the pattern of obedience unraveled. He realized that the humans had not only refused tribute, but had reminded all species that fear alone could not rule the hearts of living beings. The council still held power, but the myth of their invincibility was broken. Across the stars, humanity's legacy was clear. It was not the largest fleets, the strongest weapons, or the richest worlds that mattered most. It was courage. It was choice. It was the belief that one word spoken with resolve could shift the balance of the galaxy. And so humanity continued to grow among the stars. The colonies flourished. The fleets patrolled and protected. The people worked and learned together. They faced challenges and threats, but always with the memory of the moment when one word changed everything. The galaxy had heard their answer. They had seen their courage. Humanity had shown that no force could break a species that refused to kneel. One word had become more than a word. It had become a legend, and everywhere, across every star and every world, the story of humanity's defiance would be remembered. No,